Social Security is one of the most complex and confusing federal programs. With over 2,700 rules, it's no wonder that we're confused about when and how to start collecting and who to turn to for help. Welcome to Social Security Answers from the Experts, hosted by Martha Shedden. In this podcast series, Martha meets with professionals to provide you with the answers to questions about this most important financial decision. And now, here's your host, President and co-founder of the National Association of Registered Social Security Analysts, Martha Shedden.
Hi, this is Martha Shedden, and I am here with Elliot Raphaelson. And Elliot has quite a background in finance, in banking, and also in personal finance and retirement planning. So, Elliot, thank you for joining me for this podcast today.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, I am too. So, I'm not sure where to start. I know you have quite a background. Can you briefly describe your working background, and then we'll get to where you are now today? Actually, you've actually retired.
Sure. Well, my banking career started many years ago. I worked for Chase Manhattan Bank for 23 years, and I was fortunate that I was able to work in a lot of different areas of the bank. One of the problems with a lot of times when you work for a major bank, you get pigeonholed and you don't get to do too many things. But I was fortunate in that I was able to do quite a few, work in quite a few different areas. And one of the nice things that I was able to do was I was able to communicate with a lot of our customers as well. And I started doing some noontime seminars with our clients, and I was able to talk about a lot of different aspects of personal finance and banking, and that was a very good experience for me to be able to understand what the problems were of a lot of our clients, and I got a pretty good feel for the kind of education that the clients had, or I should say the lack of education. And I was able to learn quite a bit from these noontime seminars, and I decided that what I was going to do is try to expand and work with some of the local colleges. I wrote to the New School for Social Research, and I proposed. They hadn't offered any courses in personal finance, and I thought that would be very interesting. One of the nice things about the New School was that they have both the university side and then they have a public side. And on the public side, people just attended courses that they were interested in taking. And I didn't really want to start grading papers or giving grades, but I was able to start a personal finance course where the only people that was going to attend were people who wanted to get educated. They weren't there for any credits or any grades, and that was just a very good way to expand from my banking experience to get a better feel for a wide range of people. And so I did that for about 18 years.
Wow.
I taught at the New School, and most of my students were women, and it was very interesting. I was really a little bit surprised that I had more women than men in the course, and I guess it's not that surprising really, because when you think about it, a lot of times women feel that they don't really know enough about personal finances, and a lot of times they're married to somebody who dominates the household and makes all the financial decisions. And so I got a lot of women in the class who wanted to get better educated about personal finance. It was very interesting. And
I love to hear that, and I find that with Social Security as well. I think,
yeah,
and they're willing to become educated and ask those questions. So you did that for quite a while, and this was after you left Chase Bank.
It was a while. That 18 years that I taught were years when I while I was working. I taught the courses in the evening.
Oh, nice.
So I was doing that while I was working full time at Chase, and it worked out very well. And the other thing I did while I was there, and I really started a new career as sort of a sideline, because what had happened was there was a woman who took the course who was an editor at Vogue, and her husband had passed away, and up until that point, she really didn't run the finances in her home. And just like a lot of other widows, for the first time, they've got to face with a lot of decisions, and they just, they don't have a good education. And as you know, very few schools. So, I've had people in my courses who, got a PhD in one field, but they don't know the first thing about personal finances or running a household. And so it wasn't that unusual, to get women, elderly, well, I shouldn't say elderly, but not young women in the class that really just wanted to get educated. And sometimes they were widows and sometimes they were younger, but it was very interesting to get that kind of a cross section of people in the course. And so you get a feel for what people know and what they don't know. And I got a little bit better feel for Social Security issues there as well, especially, when you've got women in the class who never really made any financial decisions, and then they become widowed, and now all of a sudden they've got a lot of responsibilities. And
that's right. And that's one of the top Social Security benefits, the survivor benefit, that is not collected, or the full amount is not being collected. So that's really interesting. So you started writing about financial planning, and is that what you do now? Is that correct?
Well, it was interesting because after the woman completed the course, and she wrote an article for Vogue telling all of the readers how she got educated in personal finance after her husband passed away. And it was funny because right after she wrote the article, all of a sudden my class size went from about 20 to 50 for a couple of years. And that was just because, of that particular article. So obviously it hit home with a lot of women who, weren't running their household.
And they were reading Vogue.
Very interesting.
They were reading Vogue, though.
But what started the next career for me is that, now that I got all of that free publicity from Vogue, I wrote to the editor-in-chief of Vogue, and I said, "Listen, you interested in me writing some articles for you?" Well, it turned out that they did have a monthly money column, but whoever was writing that column was also working for the Wall Street Journal, and the Wall Street Journal didn't like him writing for Vogue. So for 3 or 4 months, they were looking for a woman to write the column, but they gave me a break and let me write 3 columns for them. And I parlayed that into a lot of other writing assignments. One of the nice things about working in New York is that a lot of the women's magazines are based in New York, like Savvy and Self and Working Women and Working Mothers. So once I started writing for Vogue, it was easy for me to start contacting some of the editors at some of the other magazines. So it was like a new career for me. So I was writing simultaneously articles for not only those magazines, but I wrote for Town and Country, and I wrote some pieces for the New York Times as well. So
I think that's fascinating, and I love that you parlayed your background into this wonderful helping service of teaching financial awareness, especially to women. You don't hear of that often, and that makes me happy. That's wonderful. And then I know that with your writing, you receive a lot of questions from your readers. And can you tell me what some of the most common questions you get are?
It's funny. Once I spent 23 years at Chase, and I retired as a vice president there, and I moved to the Orlando, Florida area. And I had written 2 books as well, by the way, while I was working at Chase, and I was able to use those books in my classes as well. And I also taught retirement planning for Dow Jones. I did several seminars for them over a couple of years for their retirement planning as well. And I was a little bit surprised at the lack of education of even the people that work for Dow Jones. They really learned a lot from these seminars as well. But just to give you a little background in terms of why I started the syndicated column, which I write now. Once I moved to Florida, I got involved with a lot of volunteer activities, but I really missed the interaction with the students and writing about personal finance. And I decided to write to the Tribune Content Agency in Chicago, because I did a little research and found out which of the syndicates had columnists writing about personal finance. And I just wrote a very short email to one of the key people at the Tribune Content Agency is what it's called now. And I just said, "Are you interested in another personal finance column?" And it turned out that the timing was perfect. One of the individuals who was writing the column, I guess, was getting a little bit tired of it, and he had turned in his notice, and so they were looking for somebody. So they asked me to send some clips to them. It wasn't very difficult for me to just dig out a lot of the previous articles and send them some clips, and they said, "Well, we'll try it on a 6-month basis and see how it works out." And that was like 11 years ago, and I've been writing a weekly column since then. And
wow.
One of the things that I discovered from writing the column is that Social Security happens to be one of the favorite topics of people. And I found this out just through the feedback from the columns that I wrote. And even though I write about a number of other issues as well, I talk about annuities and investing and a lot of topics that are related to personal finance. But when I write about Social Security, I get more responses than any other subject. And what I say at the end of my column is I say, if you've got any questions or comments, just write in. And I was surprised at the volume, but I think I mentioned to you before that when I was writing about Social Security, especially when the laws were changing a few years ago,
yes,
I got over 100 responses to an article, and I answer every one of them.
That keeps you very busy.
It does. It's like a full-time job.
So it's great. Social Security is one of the most common questions, and I can totally understand that. It's such a confusing, complicated program, and we don't really have exposure to it until we're already approaching retirement age, and then people don't know who to turn to for help. So if you only could advise someone for a short amount of time about their retirement finances, say you had 20 minutes to talk to someone, are there any universal pieces of advice that you find yourself giving to most people?
I think the most important thing to do is to try to combine a lot of things. In other words, if you're talking about retirement planning, for example, people have got to be able to consolidate a lot of issues. In other words, you're talking about retirement planning. Some people have got 401ks. Some people, not too many people, but have got defined benefit plans. And a lot of people have got some, a lot of savings from IRAs and in other accounts. And the most important thing is to try to coordinate all of these things together and put a plan together. And when people go into retirement, it's a completely new ballgame in terms of what their expenses are. And a lot of times people spend more in retirement than they do when they're working. They've got time on their hands, they want to go on vacation. So a lot of people underestimate what their expenses are going to be, especially if they want to do a lot of traveling and go overseas and all. So it's important for people to be able to, consolidate all of their assets and their income and So I think that's the most important thing for people to just be able to sit down and say, well, okay, I've got this lifetime income coming in from, if they're lucky enough to have a retirement plan, and some people do and some people don't. But I think that's the hardest thing for people to do, is to try to put all of these assets and income flows together and come up with a plan that's going to last them for the rest of their life.
Right. And we're also used to saving and investing and growing our assets, but then when it comes to time to spend them, that's pretty scary when you're not working anymore.
That's right.
And that, like you said, it's so complicated, all the issues that are involved with that. What would you say were some of the most common mistakes that you saw people making or they had made?
I think one of the key issues is trying to put a plan together where you can't afford to make any mistakes. In other words, when people are working, and their salaries are going up every year, they say, well, gee, maybe I made a few investing mistakes, but I can recover. I'm going to get a raise in pay, or I can get another side job. But when people enter retirement, some things are fixed, and it's not going to be that easy. A lot of times people think that they can work after they retire, and it's not that easy unless you've got a specialized type of an occupation. Most people won't find it easy to earn a lot of money after they retire. So it's important that they don't make too many mistakes.
Right.
So they've got to be a little bit more conservative in terms of putting a portfolio together. And they want to, they should be avoiding any risky investments as well, because if they make a bad investment after they retire, it may not be that easy to recover.
We saw that definitely after the recession in 2008. That took a long time to come back from that. And it's scary to be in that situation. I'd like to talk more about specific Social Security questions that you've gotten, or situations. Have you had some unusual, can you share with us any unusual cases, either your own or just questions that you've received?
Yeah, well, what's very interesting is that I talk a little bit about some misconceptions. A lot of people don't realize that once they're divorced, and I get a lot of mail from people who are divorced, and it's important that even if they're in an unhappy marriage, if they're close to 10 years, they ought to try to stick it out and make sure that it lasts at least 10 years, because as you know, once you hit that 10-year mark, then you're going to be able to generate some benefits from that divorce. You don't know whether or not you're going to get remarried or not. And another key issue, and I'm sure you're aware of it, is that if you do remarry, it's important to do it after age 60 because the benefits change. And for example, let's say that somebody's been married for a long period of time and do go through a divorce. And if they wait until age 60 to remarry, then the way Social Security works, as you know, is survivor benefits are available based on your previous spouse if you remarry after age 60. I even had a situation, and I mentioned this to you in a previous conversation. Unfortunately, my first wife passed away about 20 years ago. She had cancer, and even though we had a long and successful marriage, 37 years, she passed away, and ended up remarrying a few years later. And my second marriage is going on 20 years now. But the interesting thing about that situation was that my current wife was married for over 10 years to an individual who worked until age 70 and retired at 70, and he passed away a couple of years ago. Well, my wife never really worked very much for Social Security.
Uh-huh.
And when we married, after a year of our marriage, her Social Security was based on 50% of my benefit. And as I mentioned before, her previous ex had passed away a couple of years ago, and he worked until age 70. And my wife was surprised when she got a call from Social Security, because initially, before we married, she was receiving spousal benefit on the basis of a prior marriage. And of course, that stopped when she remarried.
Right.
She remarried after age 60. But it turned out that because her ex had worked until age 70, she was able to receive 100% as a benefit, as a survivor benefit, which was way more than she was getting from my 50%. So it was very interesting. But a lot of people still don't understand a distinction between survivor benefits and benefits based on benefit you receive from your spouse. So,
Yes.
as you know, you get 50. A woman who never works is eligible for 50% of her spouse's benefit. But when it comes to survivor benefits, it goes up to 100%. So if you were married and divorced and you remarried after age 60, you're entitled to 100% of your ex's. It doesn't matter if that ex had married 3 or 4 different times. Everyone who's been married to that same individual for 10 years is eligible to that same survivor benefit.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? But it's also reassuring to me that Social Security actually notified her about that.
They did that because she had been receiving a spousal benefit from him before she remarried.
Right. Because I have had people reach out to me who weren't aware of it, and they've let a few years go by, and then they find out that they're eligible. So like I said, it is one of the least, it's one of the ones that's missed out on a lot, I know. I could talk to you for a long time, Elliot, but we're gonna wrap it up. But before I do, I wanted to get it sounds like you're just so self-taught and knowledgeable on this topic. And so I'm sure you have your opinions on, if you were in charge and you could change anything about Social Security to extend the longevity of it. We're approaching that time when the trust fund will not have surplus funds in it. We'll be back on a pay-as-you-go system. So what are 1 or 2 of the tweaks that could be made in the rules to extend it if you could do whatever you thought was best?
Good question. Fortunately, I think that because so many people depend on Social Security, even though these trust funds, like you point out, are diminished, and it looks as though Congress is going to may have to cut back, I think it's going to be very difficult, to really do that. And I really don't think that congressmen, if they really want to be reelected, are going to be able to start cutting back on these benefits. I just hope that they're smart enough to realize that so many people depend on Social Security now, and they better, take steps to make sure that that the funds get raised somehow, so that people are going to be able to continue, to do it. As you know, very few people now who retire get defined benefit plans anymore.
Yes.
These corporations have switched to 401ks, and people, work there for a few years, and then they leave. So a lot of people, very few people, are able to accumulate enough assets so that when they retire, they've got sufficient income coming in. So a lot of people just really depend on Social Security income. So I think it's important that that Congress recognizes this, and I think they do. I don't think that Congress is going to be able to cut back in terms of benefits at all. And I'm hoping that they actually will be able to increase the.
Yes, there's so many parts to the program that can be Each little tweak that they make can extend the program. As we saw in '83, that was a huge bipartisan effort, and there were people on both sides that got what they wanted and didn't get what they wanted, but it extended the life for 40 plus years. So I'm confident that's going to happen. But like you said earlier, there'll be just more questions for you as soon as that happens, because people will be wanting to know how it affects them personally.
Yeah.
So, well, I really appreciate you joining me today for this, and I could talk a lot longer with you. I find your background really interesting, and that you ended up where you are now, and I look forward to getting more questions from you in the future if you get some that you need a second opinion on.
Yeah, well, you can count on it. One of the advantages of writing a column is you're forced to be educated. I mean, a week doesn't go by when I don't get a question that I have to do research. And you know that happens because I've already written to you a couple of times with some interesting questions that I really didn't know the answer to.
Well, you taught me something too. That one about the divorced, remarried, divorced, married, divorce, married, divorce again to the same person. That was very interesting.
Yeah.
There's some really strange things that can happen out there with the rules.
That's right.
So, well, thank you so much, Elliot. I'll sign off now, and thanks again for being on the podcast. And I'm gonna go ahead and stop.
Well, thank you very much. And I look forward to working with you and having you answer all of the questions that I can't answer myself.
We'll both learn together.
I think so.
Okay.
I hope so.
Thank you, Elliot.
Thank you.